everyone, and welcome to the Office of Higher Education's public engagement call. We want to thank you all for being here. My name is Nikki Oliver. I am the Manager of Grants and Government Relations for the Minnesota Office of Higher Education. I also am one-third of our public engagement team and also a member of our senior leadership team here at the office. We know everyone is like busy with work and summer vacation, so all of you that are able to join us, we very much appreciate it. I do want to remind everyone that these calls are recorded and we do post them afterwards. So if you want to share or look back on the call, you are welcome to do so. Um, to the purpose of these calls is for the Office of Higher Education seeks to engage with diverse communities to identify barriers in post-secondary education. The agency will work in collaboration with communities to provide equitable access to information and advice that lead to the pursuit of post-secondary education and or training for all Minnesotans. Um, this is the last of a series of calls that we had dubbed Journey Through Post-Secondary Education. This call itself is After College, What Next? This call with our panelists we have on here will be heavily focused on loan repayment and career pursuit after college. Um, and just prior to us diving into the call, I do want to provide a few OHI updates for you all. Um, just to note that during the past legislative session, our agency was assigned several new programs that also deal with kind of like college affordability and financial aid, one being a Fostering Independence grant that will take implementation for the 2022-2023 academic year. And it is essentially a last dollar in program for individuals who are in or have been in foster care. We also got increased funding for our emergency assistance post-secondary assistance program that helps students that are dealing with immediate emergencies, either with housing, food insecurity, transportation, anything that may hinder their ability to retain and complete post-secondary. Um, and we also got several new increases in funding for teachers, and one being the Aspiring Teachers Program, which is a scholarship program for teachers of color and American Indian teachers. And it is a pilot, and it will take. We are working on the implementation planning for that program as well. Just wanted to note a few of those things prior to the call beginning. And so I will pass it over to Marcio, who will talk about the logistics and introduce our panelists and also ask the questions. The chat will be open. So if you do have questions for our panelists, we will try to field those and get those answered either throughout the call or sometime towards the end. So thank you and welcome.
Thanks so much, Nikki. Appreciate the update as well. Sounds like pretty exciting news for our office, and looking forward to seeing how all these programs roll out. As Nikki said, my name is Marcio Thompson. I'm the External Relations Manager for the Get Ready program in Office of Higher Education. Joining us on this call today are three of our panelists. Two are colleagues at the Office of Higher Education, and one is an esteemed guest from the University of St. Thomas. Andrew Wall, who is currently General Counsel for the Office of Higher Education, General Counsel of the Office of Higher Education, and also Data Practice Compliance Officer at our at OHE, and then Marilyn Kozier, who is the student loan, self-loan manager at the Office of Higher Education. And then we also have Karen McCoy. She's the Associate Vice President of Alumni, Career, and Corporate Engagement and University Advancement at the University of St. Thomas. So she has a really long title and lots of jobs. So I want to thank our panelists for joining us today. I appreciate you taking out the time in your schedule. Usually on our calls, we kind of set the stage for the for what a topic that we're dealing with. And then, of course, as Nikki introduced the topic, to talk about student loans and also careers. So just to set the stage in terms of our student loan, the latest statistic on student loan debt is that shows that there are 45 million borrowers collectively owing nearly 1.7 trillion in student loan debt in the U.S. And currently in the U.S., student loan debt is now the second highest consumer debt, second only to mortgage debt. and higher than both credit card and auto debt. So you can see that there is truly a student loan crisis when we think about the data and students that the students that are taking out loans to further their education. On the flip side of that, we also want to talk about careers because we think those two things go hand in hand. And so you think about the career services, not only at the four-year schools, but also at our two-year schools that may be able to help students navigate finding a career. So overall, the purpose of students entering post-secondary is to help them pursue some type of career path and have a happy and successful life. So students who use career services to plan out the student loan borrowing and future income or career exploration are students who are making plans to be in a marketable job candidate once they complete their post-secondary endeavor. So according to Gallup, and according to a 2016 Gallup poll, college graduates who visit their career services center are not only more likely to obtain full-time jobs than their peers who do not use the service, to the tune of 67% versus 59%, but they're also more likely to find a job that is more fulfilling. And so we're hoping that you can hear some information today that helps you utilize that service a little bit better and then understand student loan debt a little bit better at the end of the call. So that's our goal today. So I'll start just by kicking off a question about student loan debt, and then we'll start from there. So what should students consider prior to taking out an educational loan?
Good morning, everyone. First, the student should really determine if a loan is necessary by taking into consideration the grants and scholarships they've received, 529 and savings accounts, anticipated earnings during school, and family contributions. If they determine that a loan is needed, again, go with the minimum amount needed to cover the academic year. In looking at loans, we do recommend starting out with federal loans that are made directly to students. After the student completes the FAFSA, it will determine their eligibility for federal subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Another good source is our state loan programs. Minnesota has the self-loan for Minnesota residents attending school in Minnesota or at one of the over 300 participating out-of-state post-secondary institutions, or non-residents attending Minnesota schools. Again, we do require that they complete the FAFSA to make sure they are receiving all of their grant money before borrowing a self-loan. North Dakota and Iowa have state loan programs also, along with a number of other states across the country, and then private loans are available from banks and other financial institutions. Once a student determines if they do need to borrow, again, there are several factors they need to consider. Interest rate being one of the most important, since that determines the cost to borrow. And is there a preference for a fixed or variable rate loan? Again, that looks at how long you might expect to take the loan out. If you're looking at a 20-year repayment, maybe a fixed loan is a better option. If you're looking at a shorter term repayment, then maybe a lower variable rate will work. Do you need a loan that doesn't require a cosigner, even if the interest rate is higher? Do you want to know what your interest rate is before you apply versus after credit is reviewed? What are the credit requirements for a borrower or cosigner? What are the repayment terms? Again, how long do you have to repay the loan? Is interest required while in school? Are there deferment or forbearance options available? Are there any forgiveness options? And many of the post-secondary institutions have on their website information about the various state and private loans that students can use to help them navigate through all the different terms and conditions. And again, it's really important that they do research their various loan options, since many of them can be quite different.
I'd like to add just a couple other things to Marilyn's great contribution there, and that was that, I think that if we're looking back to what a student should consider before taking out a loan, you really need to set the table in advance. Like in high school, for traditional students in high school, looking at what PSEO options are available, considering whether it makes sense to start at a community college, and completing the transfer curriculum if you intend to go on to a four-year school. Doing what you can to minimize the debt, and then also taking advantage of of what state and federal programs are available. Those are all important things to just be able to walk out upon graduation, looking at a much smaller number.
Thank you. I think one of the more things to be emphasized there is consider what the cost of college is and determine, maybe making a budget for yourself might be one of the things to consider doing so that you know what the cost is, uh, looking at what you're being awarded or might be eligible for in financial aid and scholarships, and then deciding with that remaining portion that you might owe, how you're going to finance that. Is that a loan? Is that working for you? Is that um, uh, borrowing money from family, or whatever the means might be? But considering all your options before taking out that loan, and then figuring out what type of loan that is that you're going to take out. So I appreciate you guys offering up that information. That's really good and very helpful.
And Marcio, when you're looking at what type of loan to get, I mean, generally you're going to go with federal loans first. Federal loans have the most benefits that they can offer. I mean, they have the big bank, right? So you're, and then once you've exhausted those funds, then you might start looking at privates, and then that's where you really have to take some consideration into it and see what program works best for your goals. Minnesota, the Office of Higher Education, we have the self-loan program, and that is a private loan because it's not federal. Even though it's a public loan, it's still considered a private loan. And when you're looking at us versus, one of the big banks out there, really digging into the terms and conditions and seeing what benefits are out there still, you might want to weigh the options and see what is in there. Now, in practically speaking, in all reality, no 18, 19, 20-year-old kid is reading through all of the terms and conditions of several different loan programs before they sign up for a loan, right? So this I think really is where like a financial aid counselor would come in, and I know that they can't push in any one direction, but being able to adequately explain the differences between some programs in a way that would benefit the student before making that decision.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. So we moved a little quickly towards that, looking at maybe repayment of the loan, and kind of thinking about when you're signing this disclosure or a statement that's saying that you're going to repay the loan, or a promissory note saying that you're going to repay the loan. What should a student be thinking about in terms of their repayment options?
Well, I think, again, looking at repayment options, you want to look at them even before you take out the loan. Just like Andrew said, you need to look into this ahead of time and know what you're expected to do. They need to understand, are interest payments required while in school? I know students frequently think that they don't need to start repaying until after they leave school. And they do. I know with our Minnesota Self Loan, they do need to pay interest while they're in school. So again, making sure they understand what they are required to do, especially while they're in school. And also, are there repayment choices after leaving school? If you look at federal loans, there's several repayment options. Many of the other private and state loan programs simply have, one or two repayment options. Again, as the student approaches graduation, or if they withdraw or drop below halftime, they again need to make sure they understand when their repayment starts. If they haven't had to do it before, is it starting immediately within 6 months, 12 months? And then looking at, are there options for deferments or forbearances, especially if they aren't employed yet? And again, every loan is different. The federal loans are different than state, private. So the student needs to be looking at this for every loan they have to make sure that they understand the terms of each one.
And again, there, I just want to reiterate, and I'm sorry, I have my dog distracting me here. So if I'm going to cover everything or anything that Marilyn just said, you know, when looking at repayment options, you really need to think about that in advance too. And one of, I think, the pitfalls that a lot of students might fall into, like when they are taking out the loan, is that, you know, everyone thinks that they're going to be an ultimate success, and that's great. It's good to have confidence, but it's also good to look at the numbers and see what's realistic. I'm an attorney, and when I went to law school, I was thinking, you know, yeah, I'm going to go out there and join a law firm and make, you know, a lot of money right away at a big law firm, and that didn't happen. I mean, it was 2010 when I graduated, the bottom of the market. You know, the job market was horrible. My dog is insane, and sorry, she's only a year old Labradoodle. She's like high energy. And you know, it didn't turn out that way the market was a lot different in 2006 when I started law school. And so, you know, thinking that that people are going to be able to make these sometimes large payments right out of school is, you know, works for 10, 20% of the population. But, you know, for 70, 80, 90%, it's a lot more difficult. And, you know, we I think should ingrain not really like a sense of fear or trying to get people to dissuade people from taking on this debt, because it does pay off in the long term, but just letting them know the practical realities of the situation, that when you walk away with $40,000 in debt or $100,000 in debt, how that can affect you long term, and making sure that you know what repayment options are out there if you go into public service, or if you are able to defer those payments or pay interest only for an extended amount of time. Different programs have different options, and so knowing what those may be in advance, knowledge is power. I mean, just try to dig into the program and see what you're going to get out of it first.
I like what you said, knowledge is power. So now there are a lot of terms that we're using here and a lot of information we're giving. If a student or parent is looking for like a good resource to find like this information while they're doing their college planning, or even in the midst of deciding, you know, maybe they've taken out a loan already and they're just looking for a place to go to get some good firm advice, not tell them what to do, but at least have good information so they can make an informed decision. Where can students and parents get support for, you know, making these informed decisions with the information? Where can they get armed with this information?
That's a tough question, because there isn't really one source. You know, I mean, like you can just Google and find articles that are written on these things. You know, I've written an article myself on repayment of loans, but there are a number of individual resources. The U.S. Department of Education has a lot of good resources on, you know, say loan cancellation, loan forgiveness, that sort of thing. But generally, those are only for U.S. Department of Education loans, so federal loans. When you're looking at private institutions, private banks, I mean, there are so many different kinds, it's impossible to kind of generalize in that respect. So, you know, I think that first you want to, like Marilyn said up front, you want to try to use what resources you are available to you that are not loans. So utilizing grants, if you're fortunate enough to have a 529 that was put into place for you when you were a child and you have access to that to pay for college. If you have, you know, a rich uncle or grandfather that is going to throw down, then those are all things that you can look at. But you know, if you're looking at loans, then I think, like I said, preparation is key. Looking at how you can minimize the debt is probably the best case for any student.
And I think going to the financial aid office at the school that the student attends, some of them are able to provide more guidance than others, just depending upon the staffing ratios. Again, They can't give specific advice, but they can at least provide some guidance, and especially for loan programs where many of their students use them, they can at least say, well, with that one, you need to pay interest, this has deferments, just kind of at least provide some guidance, or, tell you, check into this. This one normally does have a forbearance.
So next question would be, so talking about repayment here, what are maybe some things that you would say students or parents or those who are paying loans should watch out for doing their repayment? Is there certain documents they have to sign, or what are some pitfalls that you think students may run into during their repayment process that may make it more inconvenient, or some things that they should be looking out for?
Well, I think Andrew and I will probably say this several times, but again, making sure they know and understand what each individual loan requires of them, actions needed. And again, making sure you're reading as much as they can all of the information. When they receive bills or notices, they need to read them and know what's going on. During the COVID pandemic, our office offered special COVID-19 forbearances, which just required the borrower or cosigner to ask for them. We waived the requirement initially for any paperwork on it. Yet we still found that there were delinquent loans and people who didn't ask for forbearance. We tried to reach out to those people to, again, just say, if you're having trouble paying, we've got a special forbearance. And when we did connect with them, they were quick to say, oh yes, I certainly want that forbearance. But it took us repeated attempts to get a hold of them, where if they would have initially, read our notices about all you have to do is call, it could have been resolved quickly. So again, just making sure to read the notices and everything. I think another pitfall that people make is not keeping their lender or servicer informed of their contact changes, whether it be mail, email, and phone. A person can go into delinquency or default because they aren't receiving their bills and they've forgotten about the loan. And again, it's important for students to keep track of all their different loans, who their lenders and servicers are. And especially for loans where the student isn't required to pay interest while in school, it can be easy to lose track of that. And by the time they leave school, the lender servicer contacts them. Now they've got an outdated address and they can't reach them. So again, making sure that your lender and servicer can get a hold of you. And again, I think, as we've said before, not assuming that all loans are the same. So as the federal loans went through a number of things related to the pandemic, whether it was forbearances, not paying interest, things like that, there was often an assumption that that applied to all student loans. It did not. And so each different loan program, some of them offered, we offered 0% interest for a little over 9 months on the account. We did offer some forbearances, but again, you needed to ask for them. Other lenders, offered shorter term things, not interest. Again, just keeping track of what each lender is offering.
To follow up there, specifically with regard to, the likely scenario that, at least traditional graduates move around some. I know I had like 8 apartments in 8 years after I graduated, that you might lose contact with your lender. And knowing that, at least for private loans, many of those private lenders, private banks, will package and sell your loan to another, especially if you're in default. And so if you lose contact with a lender and then your loan defaults and then they sell it to somebody else, it's really hard to find where your loan is. So just making sure that, in those cases, if you see your credit score going down, you check your credit report regularly. I think you get a free one every 4 months if you space them out, right? You get one from each of the bureaus annually. So you can check out your credit report for free every 4 months. And then that will show you who has your loan. It'll show you what the balance is on there. It'll show you the status of the loan. and you can contact them to get things hopefully back on the right track. If you're looking at what repayment options are out there, for federal loans, usually you just complete the form and then they kind of decide for you. They give you what is the lowest payment that you could make. They fit you into the plan that best fits your needs, and that's how it's supposed to work. I'm not going to guarantee anything, but if you fill out the appropriate form there for, say, an income-driven repayment plan, they have, I don't remember, 8 options now for income-driven repayment plans. And however you fill out your form, the details that you put on there, they usually just slide you into the one that fits you best. And I know that the goal in DC is to simplify those repayment plans, maybe down to 1 or 2. But that student loans are a hot button topic, right? I mean, across the country. And what was true yesterday isn't true today, and what is true today is not going to be true tomorrow. So things are changing. The advice that we're giving today might be relevant or is relevant today, but when my kids go to college, I think it's going to be a very different landscape. And so I think just staying abreast of current events is also important, because things are a-changing. The stage will be set differently, and a lot of times that'll be for people who are taking out loans going forward, not really looking back retroactively. But in some cases, it will be looking back retroactively. I mean, the Second Circuit just came down on last week saying that private student loans might be dischargeable in bankruptcy, and that's not across the country. The Supreme Court hasn't ruled on it, but there are 3 courts in the country now that have ruled that way. And so, that wasn't done by politicians in DC. That was done by the courts. And I'm just saying, pay attention to current events. That's one of the biggest things, because the landscape is evolving.
Thanks, Andrew. That was great advice. Just to kind of make sure that you're paying attention to things that are going to impact you long term or short term, that may change in your favor, or if some things, if you don't pay attention to, they may be a detriment to you. So we all need to be kind of in tune to the things that are going to be impacting us and what we're doing in our lives. So I appreciate that.
And another example of kind of how things changed, there was a time where the public service loan forgiveness, I think, was passed in 2007 under the Bush administration, but direct loans weren't in existence until like 2010. So and direct loans you need to have a direct loan to have public service loan forgiveness. And so if you had loans taken out that were not direct loans, they predated direct loans, and you worked for the federal government or state government or some nonprofit that qualifies for it, and you just kept those loans from 2008, 2009, and you were making your monthly payments on those, and you think that now you have 10 years, but you were paying under the wrong plan, you wouldn't qualify for public service loan forgiveness, because that was a change that was made. But there's a temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness, and you might qualify for that program. So I mean, these, what a lot of people might have done if they had done it back in 2010 would be to consolidate all of their loans into a direct loan, and then they would qualify for it. So I mean, the thing is to ask somebody in the financial aid office, to call the Department of Education if you have those sort of questions, and they are a good resource if you can get through to them and talk to the right person. So just again, paying attention is probably the biggest key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks so much. Speaking of paying attention and things changing, we know that the way that students engage with finding employment has changed over the years as well. The days of just maybe walking to a place and filling out a job application without a resume may be a little bit passé at this point. So I'm glad that we have Karin on the call today to to give us some information about how students can engage with employment. When we talk about the career service centers that are on campuses, Karen, what is the most important thing that students should know about their career services centers?
Yeah, thanks, Marcio.
Mhm.
I think the most important thing to know, we come across a lot of students who feel like they have to know exactly what they want to do in order to walk into the career services office. And that is not at all the case. We're actually here to help students figure it out. So if you are starting from square one, that's okay. If you have an idea of what you want to do, we're happy to help you too. We're happy to help students at any part of the journey. And as you noted in the introduction, students who engage with career services are more likely to find full-time employment and for it to be fulfilling. And I think that's partly because we can help students connect what's important to them, their values, their interests, their skills with what the opportunities are. And so the most important thing is to just start early. Start talking early with the career services folks that are available, with your faculty, with parents, with relatives. You can tap into whoever is in your community, your network. Anyone can help. And I think that's a big thing to realize too, is that I think oftentimes we talk about networking, and networking can be a pretty scary word and a scary concept. And so, I like to remind students that networking really is just about having a conversation, and it's about being curious. It's about finding out, gosh, what do you do and what does that involve? So I think, the key things are, one, engage with your career services no matter where you are. If you have no idea what you want to do, or if you know exactly what you want to do, we're here to help anywhere along that spectrum. And to really just start talking with people, whether it's your faculty, again, your family, your friends, anyone who, can help you think about, gosh, what's important to me as I think about a job.
Thanks a lot for that. So as I was saying, what are ways that make students, different ways that students are connecting with employers now? I know when I was in school, it was job fairs, or maybe just posting a resume someplace. So what are ways that students are kind of engaging with the employment process now?
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. Obviously, it was different over the last year than it was previously, and it'll be really interesting to see how that changes things going forward. I resonated with what Andrew said about what is true yesterday isn't true today, and what's true today may not be true tomorrow. So the same is true of the recruiting process. There are a lot of things happening virtually right now that are going to continue, I think, into this academic year. And so students can look for opportunities to participate in a session like this with employers that gives them the opportunity to hear from different organizations about what they're looking for, what kind of opportunities they have, if they're hiring for internships. There will be some level of in-person engagement, I think, this year. That could be, there are still career fairs that you mentioned. There are opportunities to interview on campus. Some employers will come into the classroom and they'll talk with students right in their classes. There is, at the University of St. Thomas, and I know a lot of other universities, we have a system called Handshake, which is an online system where students can go to post job, or to look at jobs, to look at internships, to apply for those jobs and internships right online. It's a system that's geared for students, and to know that even if your institution does not have a system like Handshake, students with a .edu email address, any student can access that Handshake system. So when an organization goes in and posts a job or internship and makes it available to students from any college or university. Those students with a .edu email address, regardless of whether or not their institution has signed up with Handshake, they can access those jobs and internships, which is great because, like I said, that's a platform that's geared directly at early college recruiting, new graduates. There's also other, LinkedIn is a great resource and a great way to connect with different employers. It's a relatively low anxiety way because it is online and you don't necessarily have to have a conversation, but you can invite people into your network. But career services often run a lot of different events, a lot of different ways for students to engage with employers and with alumni of their institutions. So keep that in mind as well. If you have an opportunity to engage with alumni, it might not be positioned as a job search opportunity or a career opportunity, but alumni are also sources of jobs and internships.
Thank you for that. And speaking of those job fairs and internships, what's the best way for a student to prepare to take advantage of those opportunities?
Yeah, so the number one thing that we hear from the organizations who are recruiting and hiring students is that they wish that students would do their homework. So similar to being in the classroom where faculty are wanting you to do your reading, do your assignments, it's the same thing when you're getting ready to engage with employers. Do your homework, find out a little bit about the organization. Even if all you do is look at what's in the news. What are the latest news articles about that organization? But we really recommend taking some time to look at their website, understand what the company is, what they do, what kind of products they have, if they're a product-based company. But do your research, do your homework, come prepared with even just one or two questions about the organization or about the opportunities they have available. That is the easiest way to demonstrate that you are really interested in that company is by doing your homework.
Yeah, that's a good pro tip. Um, just another question around that is, are there skills that students should be trying to develop in college, in or outside of the classroom, that might make them more appealing to employers?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that question. And it's evolving all the time in terms of what skills organizations are looking for, but there are common ones that students can demonstrate in a number of different ways. So there's leadership, teamwork, or collaboration. Those sometimes go hand in hand. One that is really top priority right now is adaptability and flexibility. With all of the adapting that we've had to do over the course of the last year, that has really risen to the top as well. And then I think problem solving and creativity. So those are some of the ones that I would move to the top. And I think related to that, it's really important for students to understand how do they identify what skills they have and how do they talk about them. So instead of just, I could go to an organization and say, I have great communication skills. What an organization wants to hear is, well, how do we know that? What proof do you have? And so to be able to identify times or projects or examples that demonstrates those skills is really important. So for instance, with presentation skills or with leadership skills, to be able to say, I was involved on the board of a student organization. This was my role. Here's what I did. So being able to tie the leadership to maybe something that you did with a student organization or something in the community, being able to tie your adaptability and flexibility to a specific example of, even telling the story of how you adapted to the pandemic is a great way to demonstrate that. Thinking about teamwork. It doesn't mean that you have to have developed a teamwork skill in a job setting, but maybe you did a group project in one of your classes And what did that look like? And what role did you play? Teamwork can also be demonstrated. Maybe if you work in a restaurant or the hospitality industry, and you're able to talk about how you worked with the other wait staff, or how you worked with the hostess stand, or how you worked with the kitchen. So really thinking about not only what are those skills, but how do you provide examples that show how you've built them, so that the organization isn't left to just take your word for it.
That's great.
Karen, can I chime in there too?
Yeah.
I think that the soft skills, I think, are underrated by a lot of potential employees, so students and people who are applying for it. But coming from like the employer's perspective, these soft skills, organizational skills, conflict management, adaptability, those sort of things, those are translatable easily from career to career, and from being a student to being an employee. And so really, I'm not going to say that knowing the hard skills, like if you want to be an engineer, you need to know engineering stuff. Like that's important. It's really important to the job, but you also need to be able to sell yourself on a lot of these soft skills, because that's what employers want to know. They want to know how well you work with others. They want to know, a lot of these things, and a lot of times those are what makes the difference in a hiring decision. If you have two qualified candidates who both are A students in all of their engineering classes, and one of them sells themselves on these soft skills and the other one just focuses on the hard skills, then I can almost guarantee that one who sells themselves on the soft skills is the one who's going to be getting the offer.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Andrew. And I appreciate you really emphasizing that, because it can make the difference in an employer's decision, and often does. And so that's where I stressed, that ability to identify what are those skills. Yes, you need to develop that knowledge in your major, and that knowledge from your classes. But being able to identify those skills, and again, you get so many of them just through the coursework, whether it's teamwork or critical thinking or problem solving, any of those things. And that's where you're going to have to think about and make those connections for yourself, what those skills are. And there's so much information, thinking about how you tie them back to whatever the role is that you're applying for. If it's an internship or if it's a job, look at what the requirements are for that position. Typically, they'll say right in that role, we want someone with, strong organizational and communication skills, looking for leadership experience. Take your cues from the position description in terms of which of those soft skills, or what we sometimes now hear referred to as success skills, because they're anything but soft. But, so what are those things that the employer is specifically asking for, and how do you talk about it?
I like that new terminology, success skills.
Mhm.
Definitely are things that help you navigate and be successful in those environments. So I think that's adding something to that rather than saying something that's not viewed as valued as
Right.
much, you know. So I think that's a strong way to kind of to relate to that. I also want to ask, since there's statistically there's not really high utilization of the career services um, offices on campus, what type of outreach is being done to kind of help move students or let students know about the opportunity that they have
Mhm.
in that space?
Yeah, you're right. When you look statistically at the percentage of students who are using career services, it's relatively low. And so what we've recognized, I know at the University of St. Thomas, one of the things that we're looking at is not only how do we engage students, how are we doing outreach, how are we going to where students are. So for instance, we do programming in the dorms, and we do programming in partnership with different student organizations, but also looking at the fact that students are going to talk with people that they trust, or who they have a relationship with. It may be a professor, it may be an academic advisor or an academic counselor, it may be some other person that they've had contact with across campus. And so we're also looking at how do we provide the resources and training for those folks so that career conversations don't have to just happen in the career office. That career conversations can happen anywhere around the university, and others, whether it be a professor or another staff member, is equipped to have some basic conversations and then refer students to us for more information. So that, again, the career conversations and career information isn't just shared in this one office somewhere, on campus that students have to find their way to. But how do we go to where students are? How do we connect with the people students are connecting with to ensure that they're getting that information?
That sounds great. Looks like the efforts are being made, and I hope they're being made across the board. And also, I think that other staff and faculty within campuses having more knowledge about the opportunity for students to use services and being able to, share that with their students or encourage the students to use those services is a great tool as well. Andrew, I guess I would kind of pose the same question to you and Marilyn. Do you know of any outreach efforts that are being done to kind of get information out about a student loan repayment and student loan debt to kind of bring students into that space, or students and employers into that space, to have a conversation about repayment and opportunities for that? And if you don't, that's fine.
I mean, it's a tough one. I don't know that something like that really exists on like a mass level. I think that individual lenders may do a good chunk of that. Like Marilyn was saying before, when we're talking about some of the COVID relief response that the Office of Higher Education had regarding the self-loan program, we called people. I mean, like our office called people who were not responsive, who were falling behind on their payments, and said, we have this special forbearance. You should really take advantage of it because you're at 0% right now, and we can kick this out 9 months or 6 months, or whatever the case may have been at the time. But we really did one-on-one personal outreach. I think with the federal government and their COVID response, they just made it across the board, universal. Everybody gets this relief. But I mean, as far as like on a normal day, non-COVID related, what kind of outreach is there? I think it just really depends on the program. I don't know that there is some coordinated effort between private lenders, the federal government, and state-based lenders. But I think that each program probably does. I don't want to say each program, but many programs do what they can to help their borrowers, because I mean, it isn't in any lender's interest to have their borrower fail on payments. Lenders make the loans so that they can get paid back, and they generally want to be able to work with borrowers to do so.
I think there are increasing partnerships, though, with some employers looking at doing some repayment of loans for students as a condition of hire. We've also, I know last year, looked into Connecticut was doing a tax break for employers who would make payments on their employees' loans. So I don't know if that will be a trend we see increasing or not, but I think it's just another tool that employers have to help out students with their high student loan debt.
Yeah, that's a great point, Marilyn. We have seen some organizations start doing that more over the last probably 2, 3, 4 years. So as students are looking at job opportunities, that is one thing you can look for from a benefits perspective. There are organizations who are basically saying, we will contribute up to, maybe it's $1,200 a year to a maximum of $10,000 toward repayment of your student loan. So there are some organizations who are including that as a benefit, of employment. So that's a great thing to point out and for students to look for as they're looking at jobs.
We did have a question in the chat. Thank you guys for that for answering that. So there was a question in the chat that said you mentioned that typically only direct loans can be forgiven, and so the question is, what is considered to be a direct loan?
So the U.S. Department of Education has offered a number of loan programs over the years, and direct loans were started in 2010, as opposed to federally backed loans before that, where like a bank would make the loan, but it was insured by the federal government that it would be repaid. Now the federal direct loan is made straight from the government to you, to the student. And so it's a direct loan program. It's been up and running for the last 11 or so years. But I think that's the only kind of loan that you can get from the federal government now. But don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure that's the case, though.
Okay, so there's another question here pertaining to student loan repayment and default. And I'm not sure if we have any data around that, but does completing college um, minimize the risk of default?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't have hard numbers in front of me,
Yeah.
but you know, the completion of a college degree does impact your likelihood of getting a job in the field for which you took out the loan, and thereby increasing your income and the potential repayment of the loan. So, you know, if you, I think that the numbers show that a higher rate of defaults on student loans are from students who did not complete their degree. They went to school for a year or two, something happened in their personal life or whatever the case may be, some sort of outside or internal influence, and then it caused them not to be able to complete their credential, and that you know, just it, indirectly maybe or directly cause them to default on the loan after some time. You know, I think that a lot of that comes to, as I mentioned before, you know, setting the table, like preparing, knowing what you want, and preparing for it. I mean, let's just be honest and say that a 4-year degree is not meant for every student, right? I mean, that's why there are trade schools. That's why there are community colleges. That's why there are 2-year nursing programs. You know, and so knowing, and that's the hard thing, right? Knowing what's best for you when you're 18 years old. I mean, geez, I didn't know what I was going to do when I was 18. I had no idea I was going to be in a role like this. You know, but you know, I guess just gauging your interest, seeing what would hopefully knowing what would work best for you, and then kind of discovering that along the way too. I mean, these are all things that get built into it. But you know, if you are not the kind of student who you know, who a traditional 4-year degree would work for, then you know, find what would work for you and what you can be successful at and where your interests lie and what, you know, long term you believe in yourself to be able to accomplish, and you know, go for it. Go for it. Try to fulfill your dreams, right? And I don't want to sound corny when I say that, but you know, don't do something that's not meant for you personally, you individually. Don't take on tens of thousands of dollars in debt pursuing something that you don't feel in your heart that you want to do. You know, I mean, because you're just not setting yourself up for success there. And so the completion, I mean, I know I'm getting a little bit off topic, but I mean, like it's all in setting the table. I mean, it's all in preparing for the eventuality that you are going to complete it. And if you don't complete your credential and it makes it harder to pay these loans back, then of course there's going to be a higher risk of default.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, I think that I completely agree with what Andrew is saying in terms of, you know, what is it that you're interested in? What is it that you are good at? What is it that you have the capacity for? And it's I know that we all, students get a lot of pressure from families, from others about going into this major or pursuing a 4-year degree versus a 2-year degree, whatever it might be. And going back to what Andrew said early on, that knowledge is power. It's really thinking about, about knowing yourself, and knowing some of what you want to do. And I think related to that, there's students often put so much pressure on themselves around that first job, that whatever that first job is, it determines their career for the rest of their lives. And I think to just know that that first job is simply that. It's a first job. It's a first, stepping stone to whatever might be next. And whatever you do, it's an opportunity to learn something. There is no experience, I think, that is ever wasted. If you can learn from it, even if all you learn is, I definitely don't want to do that kind of work. You've learned something, and that gives you a step forward. And very, very few people have a career path that looks like a straight line, where you go from here to here. Most of us have this really winding path, as far as what our career looks like. And so I think just keep that in mind and look at each opportunity as a chance to learn something, a chance to grow, and know that your first job is just that. It's a first job.
Yeah, that's great advice. Excuse me. I was going to ask, can students, when you're talking about completers and non-completers of college degrees, so if a student doesn't complete, would they still have access to the resources in that career services center of the school that they previously attended? Or so if they, I attended in fall and maybe in spring I didn't have finances to attend or whatever the situation may be. Can I still like connect with career services since I was formerly a student and seek advice? Is that something? Is
It
that a
really
thing?
yeah, it really it really depends on the university and the college. It varies. I know that for a lot of universities, um, you have to not enroll for a certain number of semesters or quarters before they consider you formally withdrawn. And until that time period, you can still engage with career services. Um, a lot of universities will say if you haven't completed, you can't continue to access over the years, unless, maybe you completed an associate's degree, maybe you completed a certificate. If you've completed some part of it, you may have access to those services. And that's something to consider as well. When you complete that part, I know at the University of St. Thomas, our graduates have access to career services for life, as an alum, but they do have to have completed that degree. So I think that's an important consideration to make, and to know that, maybe if you've done 1 or 2 semesters, you need to stop for 1 or 2 semesters, for whatever reason, any internal or external cause. But until that formal withdrawal period, which is, perhaps a year of not enrolling, you would still have access and we could still provide services. But and that's, to my knowledge, the case at most colleges and universities. But it's something to look at to see where it varies.
And I think just to be, I don't have the hard numbers in front of me, but I know that I've seen somewhere that if you have gone to complete 1 or 2 semesters and then you intend to take a break for 1 or 2 semesters, many times you end up just not going back. And so having not completed, I mean, do you know I guess more on the statistics on that? I don't have it in front of me, but I mean, I would be awfully wary of, thinking that you can take a semester off, because then all of a sudden life kicks in.
Yes.
You start working and you become dependent on the paycheck that you're getting, and you say, well, now it's hard for me to go back to school because I need to survive. And then after 6 or 9 months, then your student loans start being requiring repayment, and it makes it hard. So I would say that if you can keep the ball rolling, keep it rolling. If it's unpreventable, then you may have cause to withdraw. But just know what the numbers say, and that odds are there's a majority for a reason, and odds are that you're going to fall into the majority.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know the statistics either, Andrew, but absolutely. Those who, it is more likely that if you take a break for a semester or two, it is much harder to go back and finish. So I completely agree. Do what you can to keep going. Even if it's, maybe you cut back on your class load, but as much as you can, keep taking courses. And I know that there are, loan implications as well in terms of whether you're a full-time student or a part-time student. So things to think about there, but as much as you can persist, that's highly recommended.
Yeah, I think it's worth even noting that persistence is key, and what support systems, encouraging students to tap into those support systems on campus that help them to persist. Um, because not all the time are students tapping into the resources that keep them there. They just kind of stop going. So I think maybe there needs to be more outreach in terms of letting students know that these are resources. If you're having a tough time, if you feel like you want to take a break, let's make a plan for you. Let's make a plan for your break, so that we also are making for a plan for reentry back into this space, to help those students kind of stay focused and engaged, and not let go of not completing. So 'cause I think sometimes, as Andrew alluded to earlier, there was a group of borrowers that were not paying, and sending the mail was not working, but reaching out to them via phone let them know that there was a resource that will allow them to enter into forbearance for some time. So not even just having relief from payment, probably lessen the stress in their minds and the burdens of having something else to pay. So I think that helping students even navigate that space of needing to take a break for life reasons, just making sure that we have a plan for that student to re-engage with post-secondary education in some way, helps them complete and have the benefits of completion, which are maybe finding gainful employment or livable wages, and having access to career resources and alumni resources, things of that nature, which are all things that probably need to be emphasized around the benefits of completion as well, so that students can be not only celebrated for completing, but also reap the benefits of completion. So we're at the 11 o'clock. We're at 11 o'clock, and we usually take questions from the chat at this time. And I don't see any additional questions from the chat. And I don't know if Nikki has been receiving any that I may have missed. But so what I'll ask you guys to do is maybe give some. I didn't ask. There may be some questions I didn't ask, or some information that didn't go forth. So, are there any information or advice that you would give to students or parents, or those working with students and parents, that would help students better understand kind of the benefits of knowing when to take out a loan, or how to take out a loan, and what repayment means? And also from the employment side, any information that you didn't provide or we didn't ask that might be helpful for students in knowing how to utilize career services a little bit better.
I do see there is a question in the chat that I think Andrew can respond to about updates on loan forgiveness through the federal government.
I don't see any questions in the chat, so
Oh,
maybe I'm just not able to see them. But as far as any updates on loan forgiveness, I mentioned it a little bit before, but it's an ever-changing sort of issue, and just staying abreast of current events, like paying attention to what's coming out of DC, is important, and knowing that when something passes and is signed into law, especially with something as hot topic as student loans, there will be press about it. And so just keep your ears to the ground, you know, I mean, like, and know what's changing and see if it fits, if it's something that will benefit you.
There's just many proposals going out there right now about offering loan forgiveness, and is it only federal loans, private loans? But I think it's still all just going back and forth. And as Andrew said, you know, just keeping informed when something actually does pass and is finalized. I think there's going to be a lot of press around that.
I mean, and looking at what's happened recently with, you know, the current administration moving forward some forgiveness for loans that were taken out by, you know, through like the borrower's defense. You know, I mean, like for colleges that that misled their students and were found to have done so, and by the Department of Education, and having those loans discharged. You know, I mean, like that affected thousands of borrowers. I just saw something last week about how there were a couple new schools that were added to that list and that the loans were actually discharged now by the Department of Education. And so, you know, just I mean, just paying attention is the biggest thing.
And Carmen, before you before you kind of wrap up, there was a question in the chat that says, if college advisors know that students will be dropping out of college for whatever reason, and the college cannot serve the student who is no longer enrolled, what are Minnesota college advisors telling students about career services out in the community versus their college? So is there some type of handoff or some type of reference or some type of resource guide? So I'll be quiet and let you answer that.
Okay. So I'll be honest in saying I am new to Minnesota. I am actually still in the process of moving from Chicago, and so I'm not fully versed on the specific resources available in Minnesota, but certainly from my past experience and being in Chicago, there you can sometimes find organizations that can help. But it's going to require doing a bit of homework. We certainly, again, I'm going to go back to the network piece, using things like LinkedIn, tapping into coworkers, to family, to relatives. They are often going to be a great source of information, you know, a potential source of jobs, a potential source of connecting you with other people. But as far as formal career services, formal career coaching, it's really going to vary from one community to the next in terms of what's available. And it's going to require a lot of it's going to require people to be really self-driven and self-motivated to find and utilize those resources. I know that there were some places, for instance, in Chicago, where libraries were running some job search groups that people in the community could join as a way of finding support and as a way of staying on track. So it's really about doing that homework and doing your research to see what's available in your community.
Marcio, I did put in the chat a link to our Department of Employment and Economic Development's Career Force program. They partner with a lot of community organizations and employers to help Minnesotans that are in pursuit of careers and employment in general, and they have a lot of resources on that webpage. I also put the link to our self-loan program just in case, since we did specifically mention and talk about that program as well. So just so you all know, that is in the chat. if you wanted to share that with folks you all know about a state resource for career pursuit. And I think to Karen's point, that very much like a lot of stuff we've talked about on some of these public engagement calls regarding resources and access to things. It does take some self-initiative to reach out to folks and contacts to figure out what is available, and also to Marilyn and Andrew's point about loans, to not ignore your lender when they're reaching out to try to figure out if you can't afford payments, to figure out a payment plan, because a default or to go into default will have a longer term impact on you in the future. So don't ignore those communications. I know it's very tempting to ignore I guess bill collectors, but when it comes to like educational loans, they follow you and do have long-term impacts, and even within your career can have an impact, because some employers do run credit reports. So it's very important that folks just stay in communication with everybody within regards to careers, employment, and your loans. And I'll give it back over to the panelists. And Marcio, I just wanted to chime in and make sure everyone knew that I put those resources in the chat.
And I do want to add to what Nikki said. We have seen an increase in the last few years of potential employers contacting us to find out about, especially loans that have defaulted, to see what are the people doing to repay after it defaults. So employers, again, are definitely looking at that. I did want to also just mention an initiative that we are going to be starting up this fall related to the self-loan program. It's success coaching. We have partnered with a company to provide coaching as a pilot to first-time self-borrowers. And again, the goal is completion. As we talked about today, how important it is to complete a degree. Not only does that help in repaying the loan, but it just helps the Minnesota State attainment goal, overall benefits to the student and family. So again, we're going to be looking at doing some of that, where with these first-time borrowers that choose this counseling or coaching, it'll be looking at checking in with them every month throughout the academic year, seeing if there's some issue going on. Is there maybe a car problem that they would need to drop out of school if they have a 50-mile commute to school? And again, we'll be looking at trying to find resources to help them with that car repair if there's an emergency grant program, or if there's an issue with, they think they need to drop a course for something and they should drop out of school. Again, trying to do the coaching to say, here's some alternatives. And again, our goal is having them complete.
You know, I think that it's also important to mention, I know this isn't really the topic of conversation, but just what sort of supports there are for mental health on university campuses, because sometimes, I mean, being a college student is stressful for a lot of different reasons. And I think that a lot of schools these days are doing a much better job of recognizing that and offering services that may help a student, you know, not just with life, not just with staying in school, but also with life. And if they can get that help, then maybe they can get closer toward completion. You know, so just being able to tie that in there and say that we understand that this is not easy, and getting them the resources that they need to complete is well, it's getting better, right? I mean, mental health supports across the board are getting better. So that's just, I think, something to note.
Thanks, Andrew. That's really helpful. I think that one of the things that we also try to do in this space is engage in a process where we understand that students are fully human, and that, you know, everything isn't going to be you know, some cookie cutter process, and everybody's not going to need the same exact supports to achieve what they're seeking in life. So I think that, you know, that's helpful to know that students should also be aware of that, and be aware that others in the space that they enter are aware of that and want to be helpful in that space as well. So I appreciate you offering that up. Nikki, I also found in the chat there was another resource for CareerWise, CareerWise Minnesota. It says there's a great reality check feature on there that helps students understand their financial future. So if you're working with students or younger students, or any age student probably, and you want to use some information around CareerWise Minnesota, check into their website and use the resources that they have out there available as well. So. Okay, and so, Karen, I did want to give you just the opportunity to just do a wrap up if you wanted to around career services. So I'll give you the floor is yours at this time.
Thank you, Marcio. I think for me, the important thing is to engage early and engage often in exploring and in thinking about careers. It's never too early to start, and oftentimes it can impact. We see a lot of statistics about how it can impact persistence. If students are able to connect what they're learning, what they're majoring in with a potential career path, it can help keep them focused and keep them going if at all possible. So I think the earlier that students can start down that process of understanding what do they value, what's important, what are their skills, what are the things that they enjoy doing, and we can help make those connections. So the earlier they start thinking about that, the better. And to gain experience and learn from that experience wherever they can. Great experience doesn't have to come from an internship. I know that there is often a lot of conversations around internships, but looking at any job and any involvement that a student has can make a difference in their job search. So I think it's really looking at where are they getting experience. If it's an on-campus job, if it's a retail job, or if it's a formal internship, there are skills that they're building and things that they're learning from every experience that are relevant and that can help them as they navigate the job search. So start early and look at all of the different ways that you're getting experience and how that has helped build skills.
Thanks so much. I don't see any other questions in the chat, and I don't want to jump back into any other additional questions that we might have had on our curated list. Oh, just one second. I just got another one. It says, okay. So just to kind of reiterate for all attendees, there are several resources out there that allow students to engage with the process of finding information about whether it's student loans or careers as early as possible. We host these calls to try to provide that information to practitioners or folks who work directly or come in direct contact with students and parents, so you're able to start navigating that space with your students and parents as early as possible. We want you to connect with Office of Higher Education and your higher ed institutions for support in helping you navigate these spaces with your students and parents. And so we offer this information monthly so that we can engage with you and you can engage with your demographic group to provide this information to them. And as I said earlier, and Andrew called to my attention, that we understand that all persons who are navigating this space are fully human and have things that they need different supports than just what's out there. And so we're here to offer resources for those different supports and hopefully each person can engage where they need to engage in order to help them be successful in whatever path they've chosen. Two big things I wanted to just one big thing I wanted to just say about kind of the discussion we had today, kind of the benefits. One thing is the benefit of completing, the benefits of completing college are awesome, I would say, or completing any type of post-secondary endeavor can be beneficial for your students. One, it could open up a different arena of job resources or employment resources for you. Two, it could also give you support in finding different employment opportunities. And the other thing is that completing lessens your likelihood of having to default on a loan, and that's what we don't want you to do. So, so looking at one, going in with a plan to do that, but two, completing is a big thing for students and parents to remember. So choosing a path that fits you, and then also completing that work while you're in that path. So we want you to honor that, but using the resources that you have around that to do that. But I want to thank Andrew and Marilyn and Karin for joining us today and allowing our attendees to hear about the resources and the spaces that you guys operate, and just be mindful that the work that you do is very valuable, and the information that you've given today has been very valuable, and I really appreciate you for joining us. And for our attendees, I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to come into the space and let us share this information with you. We really appreciate you. We also want you to know that this is the wrap up of this series of calls for the Office of Higher Education. We will not be having a call in August. We will start up again in September with another round of calls with resources that could be valuable to you and the folks that you serve. So we appreciate your time and appreciate you for joining us, and we hope to see you again in September. Thank you.
Marcia, before you close, I just wanted to say one more thing, to make sure people are accessing resources and reach out to our agency. There's a ton of financial aid resources. Like Andrew and them mentioned, try to access other non-loan resources prior to getting a loan, and the state has provided a significant amount of those. If you want to find out if you are eligible, please reach out to the agencies or your institutions, and also complete the FAFSA. Have individuals complete the FAFSA. There are a lot of people that don't believe they'll actually get any funding that actually do qualify for funding. So I just wanted to put that plug in as well, and thank everyone.
All right, thanks a lot, Nikki. We appreciate it. All right, you guys have a great day.